The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows. Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Manifest, where we will discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings of this TV show. And joining me today on the panel is Father Andrew Kinstetter. Hey, Father Andrew.
I thought you were going to, say joining me on the flight today.
Prepare for takeoff. Buckle up, folks. This is a good one.
Yes.
But before we get started, folks, remember to like The Secrets of Movies and TV Shows on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/StarQuest Media. Retweet us. We're on Twitter at SQPN. We're on Instagram at StarQuest Network. And leave us comments wherever you find us and share those posts and help us grow our audience. We are always trying to reach more folks, and you're the number one way we do that. I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy called The Secrets of Stargate. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Stargate. So we are talking about Manifest. This is a show that originally aired on NBC. The first season, it had 3 seasons so far. The first season came out in 2018. There was a second that went to 2018 to 19. There was a second season in 2020, a third season in 2021 that was canceled by NBC. But it went to Netflix and blew up. People discovered it. It became the #1 streamed show on Netflix for a while.
So I just want to jump in and say that I was part of the Save Manifest Twitter campaign.
Yeah.
So I would like to credit my 3 tweets for why the show came back.
Great. That's good.
So.
I was an original watcher. I watched from the pilot. I was hooked by the premise myself.
Yeah. I actually, the reason that I got into it was I'm a big Once Upon a Time fan. So Josh Dallas plays Prince Charming in Once Upon a Time. And so this was his next role was to be in Manifest. And so kind of following him on social media, it was like, oh, there's this new show about a plane that time travel. Oh, it's time travel. I'm so in. Like anything with time travel, I just love.
And the thing is, I'm a big fan of Lost. So seeing the premise of a plane that disappears and weird stuff happens, I'm like, oh, I'm back into that. Yeah, I mean, that's right up my alley.
The thing that I'm hoping for is, unlike Lost, I hope that Manifest gives us a more satisfactory explanation and conclusion. I was not entirely thrilled with where Lost decided to say was where things all went at the end. Okay,
this is not a Lost podcast. We will be talking about how this compares to Lost. But my short answer to that is, I listened to the podcasts that Damon Lindelof and Colin Hughes, the showrunners, did at the time. So early podcasting.
Yep. And
I think having listened to their discussions of the show all the way through, they didn't come out here and explain the ending, but I had a satisfactory experience of the ending. Unlike most people I know, I recognize that, but
I should go back. But I guess there was so much that I wanted. I love mystery, but I always feel at the end, the finale, the climax, I want to know what the mystery is, and there was just so much that they just didn't explain.
I know. Yeah,
and as a fan of mystery, but I kind of wanted more.
So even like this,
I think that's part of our quizzical, curiosity, scientific mind, is we want to understand things, and when we can't fully understand it, it's like.
I've been threatening to do another podcast called Lost Again, where we revisit the original Lost, and that may happen someday.
I think if I go back to it, I will like it. I'll like it all over again, but I'll probably be happier with where it goes.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Manifest though, because, and let me give a quick summary of basically where the show starts. I'm not going to summarize all 3 seasons right off the top, but let me tell you how it starts. So there's the flight Montego Air Flight 828, not a real airline, of course, because they don't use real airlines when plane crashes.
No one would fly Montego Air.
Exactly. While traveling from Jamaica to New York City, experiences some severe turbulence. And when they land at the airport at Newburgh, New York, not at one of the big ones, but in Newburgh, New York, the plane's 191 passengers and crew learn from there was an NSA deputy director there, Robert Vance. He's there from the first episode, that 5.5 years have passed since they took off from Jamaica, during which time, of course, they were presumed dead, that the plane had gone down and they were dead. And so as they rejoin society, they have to figure out, how do I reclaim my old life? What has changed? What have I lost? Which is kind of funny because this predates the Avengers Endgame blip, which maybe we should talk about that too. So their lives and their loved ones are not in the same place that they were. And they also begin to, and then the really weird stuff starts happening, and they start getting callings, experiencing voices and visions that they end up determining are some supernatural or extra natural guidance, and then other weird stuff happens, and we can talk about that as we go along. Do I about cover it?
Yes. This is one of those that, I mean, yeah. I think big things to I mean, maybe we'll just kind of get there as we kind of talk through it, because I think definitely people who are listening, hopefully if you watch the first 3 seasons, and of course it kind of ended on some major cliffhangers, so we're all kind of anticipating what's coming next, and we don't know. And there are some overarching plot points that we will we'll get to. So yeah, I think in general, that's the premise, and yeah, we can get into some details as we go along.
And I should have mentioned, one of the big reasons we're talking about this now is the day after this episode drops, the Netflix is releasing the first part of the 4th season of Manifest. The first 10 episodes will drop, and then they're going to drop a second 10 episodes of that season later at some point. So Netflix is now doing this thing where they're not releasing everything at once, but they're kind of doling it out a little bit.
What's cool about that is originally it was I think, was it originally supposed to be a 6 season? I think it was originally supposed to be
5 or 6. I think it might've been 5. So I think I remember, I remember 5, but I could be wrong.
I'm thinking that I remember it was supposed to be 6, and what they're doing with this final season 4 is they're having 10 episodes as part 1, 10 episodes as part 2, which gives them basically 2 seasons,
right,
to kind of contract and compress the remaining story.
Yeah, because the Netflix season is basically 10 episodes. I mean, you don't hardly ever get anything longer than that on a Netflix show. So that's basically they're getting 2 more seasons. And 20 episodes is, they did 16, 13, and 13 in their NBC seasons. So it's not like they had a lot there. So
well, and with having it streamed on Netflix, if they do anything like they did with Stranger Things, some of those episodes were like 2 hours long for one episode.
Yeah, so it's possible.
So we could see fluctuations in time limit, and I know that they did compress the story somewhat, and the writer was talking about just online in talking about the Netflix revival, and it kind of forces them as the writers group to be very conscious about hitting all the plot points that they want to hit and doing it in lesser episodes and have less filler.
I felt like season 3 around the middle, it was dragging. It was getting a little filler-ish. And I was starting to lose interest. And I didn't even finish watching the last 2 episodes until I found out that the season 4 on Netflix was coming. I'm like, I get this thing. If a show gets canceled in the middle of my watching it, I sometimes just lose hope. If I know like there's no point in watching more because I'm never going to get to the end of the story, which is so weird. Well, never mind. But when I found out we're going to get more story. Oh, now I'm back in. And to be honest, the last 2 episodes were pretty darn good. They actually advanced things and brought us to an interesting point, which we'll talk about. But
and I think it's cool to point out too that NBC canceled the show. Netflix declined initially to pick it up.
Yeah.
And it was the fans and the fact that then Manifest seasons 1, 2, and 2 and 3, I think, over the summer were released on Netflix, and they broke all sorts of records.
Right.
And then Netflix on August 28th, 8/28, announced that they were reviving it for season 4, which I think is definitely the win-win situation here, because they even talked about they could have done it or finished the story in a movie, but they would have had to have really crammed stuff in. So I'm really glad that it's a 2-part, 20-episode Netflix kind of finale run.
I mean, there's a conversation to be had about what this says about network TV, and the power of the audience over the past. I mean, audiences even in the past have had the ability to impel networks to keep a show alive a little bit. Star Trek being a famous one, season 3 of Star Trek. But in the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, it's really like The Expanse is another example of a show that was done wrong by its original network. I forget which one, and then ended up on Sci-Fi, I think it was, or was it? No, it was on Sci-Fi, done wrong, ended up on Amazon Prime on a streaming service after the fans clamored for it. And the last 2 seasons were fantastic, Yep.
It's crazy. I mean, I think of even like Sonic the Hedgehog, like the initial CGI of that was so terrible, and the fans made it known that they didn't like it, and they redid it. And you almost don't think that we have that sort of power, but ultimately, I mean, they're making things to entertain us. And if they're going to make something that we don't like and don't pay for, they're going to lose money. So it does make sense.
And there's often, or almost always, someone on the inside who's advocating the same thing. And the force of the fans is his ammunition or her ammunition to get the powers that be to change course. I am certain that the people in charge of the FX on the Sonic the Hedgehog movie also weren't happy with the quality that they were being forced to put out, and so that was their leverage. I think it's really true that the audience does have power, and and we can influence how our favorite shows or franchises go by being vocal about it, and not like completely negative. I mean, in fact, I think negative, setting aside the Sonic the Hedgehog one, but in general, basic negative or just bland negativity, if that's a term, like some people are Star Wars haters. We hate the Disney Star Wars. That's just sort of blanket hatred. That's not specific critical criticism that's constructive. So I think positive pressure is even more powerful.
I think this is a whole podcast topic for a separate time. So I just want to say one thing about it. And what I didn't mean is that like we as the audience have the power to dictate the story.
Yes.
Because that would be wrong. I want to be surprised, and I want the authors and the writers to have I want them to tell the story that they want to tell.
Right.
I just appreciate having power as a watcher to like say, hey, I like this.
Yes.
Please,
keep making this.
Please keep making this. Yes. I'm not up there saying, oh, I want the story to go this way or that way.
Right.
And that's what some people do. And that's even the Star Wars haters. I can understand where they're coming from, but it's the Star Wars. They want the story to go a certain direction.
That's right.
And that's why some of them are.
Yep. Good point.
But again, we should.
But we're talking about Manifest. All right, let's get into it. So
yes,
the flight is Flight 828, and a big part of, at least in the early season, the first season, they made it kind of a big deal about the fact that 828 and Michaela and Ben Stone's mom, who dies while they're gone, which is a plot point of the first season. Her favorite verse in the Bible, and because she's a religious, faith-filled person, I think they're Catholic probably, but they might not be. I don't know if they were. I'm trying to think.
I sort of always just got the impression that they were Christian, and that like especially Ben, of course, is sort of, I think he claims at some point to be either atheist or agnostic, right? But then because that becomes a theme, like he has to grapple with, is this divine? And he's trying to figure it out scientifically. But she's definitely, I've always seen her as a a good model of a faith-filled Christian, whether Catholic or just non-denominational.
I guess not super important, but her favorite Bible verse was Romans 8:28, 8:28, the flight number, which is, we know that all things work for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. And that's not just it's going to work out sort of thing. I think that verse is key to understanding Manifest, because this is at the root of what Ben, especially Ben and Michaela, struggle with throughout the series, which is, are we, there is an intellect behind this. There's a will behind what's going on. We're being directed. Is this a good person or a bad person or persons behind this? And they're being called according to a purpose. And so this verse is sort of the hope that what we're doing, they are stepping out in faith, and faith is the word faith, and the concept of faith is brought up a lot in this episode, usually in the broader sense of just faith in general, not specifically religious faith, but also it's in there. But they step out in faith that what they're doing is for the greater good, even against opposition and all kinds of things. So I find that very interesting that verse is kind of sits at the center of what's going on, and I wonder if it's intentional.
I think it is, because, I think one of the questions that they want us to continue to ask, and we, of course, still don't have an answer, is, who is this intellect behind the callings? Is it God as we understand it? Is it aliens? Is it, it's
always aliens. It's always demons.
Always demons. Is it? So, I mean, so definitely the is it God is meant to be a question always at the back of our mind. And they grapple with that because there comes a point where they start following the callings, and, like that first episode, Michaela discovers the abducted girls, and rescues them. And so, like, there's this immense good that results of it. And so she starts thinking that if you follow the callings, they're prompting you to do good in the world. And then there comes a point, this is, I want to say this season 2, it must be season 2, when she encounters the meth heads.
Yeah.
Because she is, like, all the way up until that point convinced that we have to follow the callings. They're doing good, they're saving lives, and they're fixing wrongs and whatnot. And she doesn't want to disobey the callings. And then she encounters the meth heads, and she gets a calling that specifically tells her to let them go.
Yep.
And she disobeys the calling because she assumes that it means let the meth heads go, don't bring them into custody and arrest them.
Right.
And so she arrests them instead of letting them go, and that leads to Cal's abduction. And so she's blaming herself because she should have let them go, because if she let them go, they would have died in the explosion of the meth house. And so they definitely are playing with that, whether are the callings inherently good or are they bad? Who are they from? Right.
Because the callings are not an unalloyed, like, there isn't always good that results from them, it seems like. Of course, sometimes it's hard to divine God's plan for things, and sometimes what looks like God letting bad things happen is not right. It's according to a larger plan. But nevertheless, there are times when it seems like the callings are almost malevolent. There's the meth heads suffer consequences for failing a trial, and we'll talk a little bit more of that in a bit. But so the callings are a bit ambiguous in their nature. I think I'm not sure what I want them to be. Do I want them to be God calling them, like, explicitly God? Will I be disappointed if it's merely, I don't know, magic, some wizard, or something, or like ESP or something?
Good question. I've inherently being, of course, Catholic and kind of, we have this inherent ability to relate to this, because when we are prompted by that voice of conscience, that voice of the Holy Spirit in our hearts, and we're like, oh, I should really act, I should really say this to that person. We know that if we follow those, they might not always lead to good results initially, but we know that if we follow the promptings of the Holy Spirit, it is going to lead us closer to God, and and that's good for us and the people that we encounter. And so from coming from that perspective, I always have that mentality and think, if I had a calling like this, I want it to be from God, because if it's not from God, then who am I following? I'm following this alien or master manipulator or whatever. And I tend to think that it's going to be some conglomeration of all of the above, because they're pulling in not only the Christian idea of God, but also Egyptian mythology and like, so I don't know if they're sort of going for like, kind of take every culture's idea of God and make it one. Yeah. Or like, and then part of me is like afraid if they do make it God, it's not going to be the God that I know as revealed in Jesus. And so I'm going to be disappointed. So maybe I do want it to be some magician who's like,
or aliens,
manipulating everything.
Yeah. I mean, if it were aliens, then it's just aliens, and we're back to basic sci-fi. But
But what's cool about it is that no matter, I guess, who's ultimately the one in charge of it all, it echoes real life, real experience. Yeah. Because we have all, even if you're not Christian or you've never really thought about it, we all have those kind of promptings of our conscience, and we all kind of know, like, when we see someone in trouble, like, oh, I should really do something about it. And then when we do it and we save someone, there's the gratifying feeling of helping out, our fellow human beings. And so I think we all ultimately are seeing the good from this. And I guess kind of, I always put myself in their shoes, and I don't think I would get as crazy as Ben, but I would follow the callings for sure.
It's, I would hope I would be, I would hope I have a well-formed conscience. I mean, that's the prerequisite to being able to follow it, is that your conscience needs to be well-formed. I like the idea that it's sort of normalizing the concept of following a prompting to do good. Because we all have, not necessarily supernatural visions and voices, but we all have a conscience. We all have the natural law written on our hearts that prompts us to do right. That little voice of the Holy Spirit, however you want to think about it, but it's in there. We all have it, and we all need to be listening for that. And so I like that this show normalizes people going to extreme lengths to do good. When they get the call, when Michaela gets a calling, or Ben gets a calling, or Cal, or whoever, they go overboard, sometimes quite literally, to do what needs to be done. I like that.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I am not at all able to come up with an example of a calling that said do something morally wrong. They're like the let the methods go was not a morally intrinsically bad act. It was the wrong from a legal perspective, and from like the act of letting them go would have been morally neutral.
Yes, and might have actually been mercy that would prompt one or more of them to so and that again tells me that it's a benevolent source. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I watched that season, but did the meth heads themselves not get sort of like anti-callings? Like did they not get supernatural promptings, but to do evil?
They got callings after they were resurrected, and their callings were leading. No, actually they were getting callings to their coach from junior high and high school to out him out as a drug dealer.
Okay.
But the one, the bad one, well, the most bad of the bunch wanted to go and kill him.
Okay, that's right.
Whereas the other two sort of felt drawn to him, and Michaela came, and so she arrested him, and there was justice there. But I think they all got callings to fix a wrong, but I think the bad one just wanted to fix it by killing instead of fix it by doing something right.
Right, but a bad means to a good end of fixing. That brings up the three. We call them the meth heads because that's what they call them in the show. And they didn't give them another name, and so we call them the meth heads. But so they die under the lake. They fall through the ice at the end of season 2, or I forget what it was, but they fall through the ice, and they're resurrected like 84 days later, just like the people from Flight 828 came back after a period of time. Like they disappeared under the ice. Their bodies were never recovered.
Right. We should probably let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
I'll give kind of, because this is more of a plot thing versus a philosophical discussion, and so to maybe to help get our minds around it, especially for the listeners, because I think this is going to very much lead into season 4. The whole idea is that the Flight 828 disappeared, reappeared 5 years later, and Ben and Michaela and the whole group are wondering what to do and what's going on. And then we encounter various characters who slowly reveal what's going on to us as the audience and to Michaela and Ben and the group. The first one being Griffin, who is in season 1, because he's part of he steals money, he kills his accomplices, and he drives the vehicle into the river. And then he's down there for 3 days, and and of course they can't find him for 3 days. He disappears for 3 days, and they pull him out of the river after 3 days when he reappears, and magically he survives and has no harm done to him. And he then also starts to receive the callings. So Michaela understands that the same thing happened to him that happened to them on the plane, and she tries to get him to use his callings to do something right. And so this is, again, one of those issues of how are you going to respond to the callings? Because he has a calling about a bomb threat.
Right.
And he responds with, he's going to use it to get out of jail free card. He's going to use it as leverage to not have any charges brought against him for stealing this money and the murders. So he's using it for a selfish reason, which then 3 days later he drowns above dry ground. Land. Yeah. Which was really difficult to watch the first time that I watched that. And so it points out initially, at least to the characters, is that if you don't follow the callings, this is the consequence, is that you will die the way that you should have died when you disappeared. So then we go into season 1, season 2 with Zeke, who disappeared for a year in a cave in northern New York. Right. And so same thing, he's having these callings, and Michaela's helping him reconcile with his mom. He's reconcile with various people. He had a druggy friend that he kind of reconciles with. I forget that whole plot point, but he does what's necessary to reconcile with people and follow the callings. And following the callings ultimately leads to the end of season 2, where he saves Cal's life in the frozen lake, where the meth heads go into the lake. Yep. And they disappear. And Zeke lives. He passes what they call the death date.
Yes. You have, when you come back, they figured out you have as much time to live as you were gone.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So actually, and that was June 22nd, 2024.
Yeah.
Is the passenger's death date, so to speak.
Right. That's when they expect to die. Yeah.
Yep. So I expect if the original plan had worked out, the final season, the finale would have fallen on June 22nd, 2024.
Yeah.
That was exactly what I was thinking they were doing. And Netflix may drop the final 10 episodes on June 22nd, 2024. I don't know. We'll see. But so you have Griffin, who disobeyed the callings and dies. Zeke obeys the callings. He lives. And then we have the meth heads, the 3 brothers who go into the lake and then come back in season 3, and they prompt this whole plot line of they also are receiving callings. 2 of them are able to reconcile with people and do what's right. The bad one doesn't. And ultimately, when they hit their death date, they think that the 2 who reconciled are going to live, and they realize by looking at this Egyptian mythology of a test, and I forget all the Egyptian gods and whatnot.
Yeah.
If one fails that test of following the callings, everybody in that group dies. So then all 3 die at that point in season 3, which then leads into Michaela and Ben and the whole group knowing, okay, all passengers on the airplane, we're all linked in one lifeboat. If one of us fails the test at the end, we all perish. We all
die. Yeah.
And so I think that is going to, that's Ben's kind of, he's prompted to save the lifeboat, and he's starting to do it in very extreme ways at the back half of season 3. and of course, whatever season 4 lays before us.
Because of course his son Cal is, in that boat, and so he's trying to save his son. And Cal is an interesting character in this. He's sort of a linchpin character. So he leaves as a 10-year-old boy, I guess he is, and with terminal cancer. And so his Grace, his mom, and his twin sister Olive take a different flight out of Jamaica from their family vacation. Michaela, Ben, and Cal are on the 828 flight. And so it's interesting. He's got a twin sister, but she's 5 years older than him when they come back. And he's got this terminal cancer that he's being treated for by another one of the passengers, Dr. Sanvi, and Sanvi Bal. Yeah. And, but he seems to be the most important of the passengers. He gets more of the callings, more intense callings, and he interprets them. He has a better understanding, perhaps, of them than other people do. He's more compelled to answer the callings. So it's interesting, and a child shall lead them. I mean, he's this interesting character, and meanwhile, mom and dad are like, no, don't do that. Don't go off and don't do we're trying to protect you. And, and by the end of the season 3, I'm like, look, listen to the boy. When right. How long do you have to go before you start listening to the boy? But people refuse to listen to Cal or Ben by the end of it when they've been proven right over and over again. But Cal's a very interesting character. I kind of fascinated by
think it helps that, or it reinforces the idea too, I guess, that just the as a child, he's got that, I don't mean this in a bad way, but sometimes children just have greater openness to the wonders of the world.
Sure.
And, and so he's, and that could be why they affect him deeper is that he's able to see things that we as adults we lock ourselves in our scientific worldview or whatever, and we're just not open to it. And there's let the children come to me and do not hinder them,
Right.
Yeah. And Cal, well, I'm still just kind of blown away for the end of season 3. I don't know if you wanted to go there just yet, but Cal's story is coming.
Yeah, I want to end on the end of season 3 and our speculation for season 4, but I want to kind of jump back. So they lose 5 years, and that's a big deal. I mean, to lose 5 years of your life and to come back and 5 years have passed. And I mentioned earlier that's sort of the plot of Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, like the blip. People disappeared 4 or 5 years. They make it 5 years in that too, which is around the same time. It was 2019. It was kind of funny. That they were there together. What would it be like to come back and try to reclaim your life? And we see some of the characters, like, people whose spouses got remarried or died in the interim, or we've seen characters who they have no job anymore. Their job has been given to someone else. Their house is gone. They have no place to live. And I mean, I imagine if I came back and I missed 5 years of my kid's life, and my wife is 5 years older than she is now. I mean, that would be traumatic, I think. Obviously it would be traumatic. It's hard to imagine.
Yeah, I think the show does a really good job of trying to give the two perspectives. And I think you see it most with Ben and Grace.
Yeah.
And especially their relationship, because for Ben, no time has passed at all. And he kind of wants to just come back and pick up right where they left off, because for him, no time had passed. For him, it was just coming back and picking up and everything's normal.
Right.
But then he had to kind of to learn to kind of see things from her perspective, that she had lost him for 5 years and had been depressed, and of course find solace in Danny, and Danny kind of becomes a father figure to Olive, who lost her father. And he's kind of got to realize it's not his fault that he wasn't gone for that he was gone for 5 years, but he also has to realize that she's 5 years different, and it's It's a fascinating sort of kind of thought experiment of what would you do in that kind of a situation. And, for some of them, it works out really, really good. It's, and for, some of them, losing houses or losing loved ones or, that's all just human things that you have to deal with.
I can't imagine what it'd be like to go out for the day, come back tomorrow and find my wife with another guy. And by the way, Grace was pregnant with I think they determined it was Danny's baby, right? Or did they?
No, it's they determined that it's Ben's baby because she starts to have callings because of her pregnancy.
Oh,
and that can only happen if Ben is the dad.
Right.
Which I am so thankful. I did not want some weird love triangle.
Because Danny ends up leaving the situation, but Ben tries to be loving. I mean, it's an interesting situation. How best can he love his wife, who is now in this difficult situation? He tries to give her space and tries to, be accommodating to this thing that would tear me up inside, and I'm sure was tearing him up inside. So, how sometimes the best way to love someone is to, not walk away, but, let them be for the moment, despite the pain it causes you. We talked about before. So if say Ben and Grace were Catholic and were married in Catholic church, was she technically cheating on him by dating this other guy? Let's not get into whether they were, extramarital activity. That's clearly would be a sin. But say she was just dating this other guy. When Ben is gone, she's not committing any type of sin because obviously by any reasonable standard, he's dead. Right?
Yes. So it's funny because I'm studying canon law right now, and with this not this exact conundrum came up in class, but we're looking at impediments to marriage. And so from a legal canonical perspective, actually, she is not free to enter into marriage, even though Ben disappeared.
Oh, interesting.
So because this is what's interesting about it is one of the impediments to entering into a marriage. And actually, this would apply to a non-Catholic as well, because marriage, we recognize the marriages of two unbaptized or two
that's true.
Non-Catholics. Right. If they're baptized, if one of them is Catholic, they're bound by canonical law. But even like if two unbaptized people get married, we recognize that as a valid marriage.
Sure.
Anyways, so any two people who enter into a marriage and it's presumed valid, neither of them are free to enter into another marriage because they have what's called a prior bond to their first spouse. In Latin, this is called legamen. So they have a legamen already in place. And the way that the law is written out is that if there is doubt on the potential death of a spouse, they are still not free to enter into marriage. And so I'm going to read the canons here just because I found this really interesting. This is canon 1707, paragraphs 1 and 2, if you want to look it up. But it says this: whenever the death of a spouse cannot be proven by an authentic ecclesiastical or civil document, which in this case, there wouldn't be any documents that prove that he was dead. Oh, I guess there would have been sort of. Okay, anyways.
Yeah, we'll get to that. You just finish reading that.
The other spouse is not considered free from the bond of marriage until after the diocesan bishop has issued a declaration of presumed death. The diocesan bishop is able to issue the declaration mentioned in paragraph 1 only if, after having carried out appropriate investigations, he attains moral certitude of the death of the spouse from the depositions of witnesses, from rumor, or from evidence. The absence of a spouse alone, even for a long time, is not sufficient.
Okay. So that would cover the guy going out for cigarettes and never coming back. Okay.
Correct.
But I'm pretty sure even in the show, they say that death certificates were issued for these people. That
okay. I think you're right.
If an airplane never lands, like if you know these people were on the airplane and no one sees, and it flies over ocean and never land, kind of like what was that plane that flew out of Indonesia several years ago and disappeared over the Indian Ocean?
Yeah.
You know, it's presumed, I would think, at some point you say, yeah, I mean, where could it be? Like and death certificates get issued, and everyone kind of moves on as if. But this actually, there's a reason this sort of canon law exists, not because time travel, but in the past that this sort of thing happened where guys sailors would sail off, not return home for 10 years, and then show back up again. And
they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have the internet back then.
Exactly. I think what was it? Davy Crockett famously went out one day and never came home, was presumed dead, and then came home to find some other guy married to his wife. The famous Davy Crockett story.
So definitely, at least then, and I think you're right about the death certificates in the show, because she had insurance that she had to pay back.
Right. Yes.
So yeah, you're right there. So, but definitely then from a canonical perspective, the fact that he's not dead and came back means that she was never free, even if she would not have been culpable for, engaging in a new relationship, because she had no reason to think that he was alive. But that bond, I'm going to argue that because it never ceased for Ben, because he skipped 5 years, but I'm in my mind, I'm saying that bond existed even in the 5 years that she experienced without him, because he never died.
Well, because the bond can't go away and come back. The bond is either there or it isn't there. So,
right. It's only dissolved by death, or there are a few certain rare exceptions where the Holy See can dissolve it, but this doesn't fit any of that.
Yeah. Now, she didn't marry Danny, but other passengers' spouses did remarry, and in those cases, those marriages would be invalid from a Catholic standpoint.
Yep.
And
in fact, probably, I mean, even legally, they would have had to have figured it out, because you have, it's interesting, because even legal law, there are annulments in legal law, which most people don't even realize.
Apart from
divorce, even legally, even legally, there would be this weird, of course, with the death certificate, that would probably just kind of wash over everything and say, I mean, it's interesting to think about from all kinds of standpoints. This show raises all kinds of interesting questions that about how we would deal with such things, but certainly that the moral and ethical standpoint related to the marriage and family. So a couple other things that are the part of the plot of the show is when the 828ers come back, people have various reactions to them. Some people treat them as, celebrity curiosity, but other people become super fans. They get like fan clubs and all kinds of stuff like that. Some people are afraid of them. They think that they're demons, or that they're part of an alien conspiracy or a government conspiracy, or there's some kind of big cover up. Some people think that, they might be aliens, but in a good way, or they treat them as religious icons or leaders or prophets. And in fact, one of the passengers, Adrian, ends up founding the Church of the Return, which is, I mean, it's kind of understandable that it's this miraculous event in a way. How do we deal with it? How would we deal with such an event? I think people would react in these varied ways to such an unexplained circumstance. If you encounter someone who is presumably died, been resurrected, I wouldn't become fanatical about it, but it would be tempting to look at them as either angelic or in touch with God in a way that the average person is not.
Yeah, they don't get into it, but it makes you think, how would the church approach this? What would the Vatican say? What would, what would the church's response to such an event be? I mean, my guess is it would be awe. It would be sort of reserving judgment and we need to learn more, but we trust in God and his mercy, and that there are miracles all the time that God brings about.
That's exactly what I was going to say that we would, I think we would look at this as exactly that, a miracle, because it breaks all known laws of physics as we can understand them.
Right.
And we have examples of miracles that break the laws of physics as we know them. And so the church, I think, would look at this and say, God is the one who ordained this. He's the one who put it into motion and made it happen. And we don't understand it, and we may never understand it. And even the core of this Church of the Redeemed is the miracle. In fact, they kind of, I wrote these down, and it kind of gives me the creeps a little bit, because it's a distortion of the Beatitudes, but they have they're kind of the Beatitudes of this church. And they say, blessed is flight to 828, the vessel of the miracle. Blessed are the returnees, the purveyors of the miracle. Blessed are they who are left behind, for they shall be brought to the light. Blessed are they who serve, for they make the light shine. And the whole thing, of course, is meant to be a bit of an exaggeration and a bit over the top, as any good drama does. But it highlights points and it highlights truth. This is how some people act. Even the airplane kind of symbol in the back of the church is vaguely reminiscent of a cross in the way that it's kind of laid out. And it's just, some people, this is how they would react to someone like that, and just become kind of fanatical, cultish about it. And even that with the one guy, Gabriel, I think is his name, where he tries to set up this situation where he's going to burn the club down.
Yeah.
With the whole idea is that they're going to have another miracle. And we can clearly see oh my gosh, he's crazy. But there are people out there who sort of do that, who will
the irony is that a miracle does occur through the callings that saves everyone. In fact, the irony is he brings about not exactly, but kind of what he was aiming to do. It is, it's interesting where manifest comes from in the society we're in, which is increasingly secular. I'm curious, I know how I approach it as a Christian. How do people who carry no particular faith, maybe agnostic or even atheist, how they would approach this sort of idea? Well, how would you explain it? How would you put this in your worldview? And it's a drama, it's a TV show, so it's fiction, and people probably just dismiss it as a good story, and it's like magic, and Lord of the Rings, so whatever. But when people of a particular viewpoint are confronted with something that completely potentially undermines that viewpoint, they can react in unexpected ways, in lots of different ways. And I think the show does a pretty good job of depicting that. I mean, it's a good show. It's not a perfect show. It's not even up to my mind, up to the level of, let's say, Lost was. But it does a good job within the constraints of basic network TV that it has, of kind of addressing some of these while also being an interesting drama that has a mystery at its heart. I think it does a pretty good job of depicting how the different ways people react to this circumstance.
Yeah, it forces, I like, because I think you can look at the characters and you can relate to the different characters maybe at different points in your life, or someone who would react like they would.
Yep.
Because this show purposely wants you to ask the big questions. Is this God? What is God? Is there a benevolent entity that's guiding everything? Is there such a thing as free will? Or, are we, in fact, that's the free will versus determinism is one of the interesting points. Are we all robots that are just programmed to follow these things? Or not. And you're meant to ask those big questions. And then you have people in the show. There's one lady on the plane itself that is sort of talking about a shared consciousness as an explanation for it. So she's coming at it from kind of a scientific, even paranormal, but not supernatural explanation. And so you've got the supernatural explanation, you've got a paranormal explanation, you've got the people who just don't understand it and therefore are scared, or these are a threat. You know, the 828 haters,
the Xers, I think they are, right?
Yep, the Xers, because they were marking the houses with X's, and because they assumed that they come to destroy the world or something, and so they're scared of the unknown, and or you've got the people who think that they're angelic and miracles, and they just want to touch you, and you know, we all, if we haven't been in one of those positions, we all know someone who's been in that position, or who's asked that question, who's looked at the world that way. And so I appreciate it because it forces us all to kind of take a step back and say, well, how do I think about this?
Right.
And not only about the show, but about our world.
Yes. Any good work of literature, which is this kind of a visual literature, makes us think about the world around us, and about, you know, that's kind of what we do here at StarQuest is, you know, look at these works of fiction and see how they make us look at the truth and the reality of the world around us. And I think the show does a good job of that. You know, speaking of people reacting, you know, a really good example is passenger Angelina. She was a young woman, like a teenager, whose parents are religious fanatics. That's how they're portrayed in the show, who react very negatively to the daughter was on the plane, but they weren't. And so when she comes back, they cage her up in
they
their
lock
house,
her like in the basement or in a dark
they think she's possessed or something like that. And there's this poor girl who herself, she was a believer, she was a Christian, she, you know, loved Jesus at the time, and this messes with her, and she ends up getting rescued by Ben and Michaela, and goes to live with Ben's family, and then she kind of loses it a little, more than a little, and becomes obsessed with them. She thinks Cal is a new Moses, and so she wants to be his new Aaron. And then she becomes obsessed with Grace's baby and calls him her guardian angel. And then she sets fire to the house at one point. Yep. And I mean, then she starts like doing the whole becoming Olive, like the daughter that you know, assuming her identity.
That I could totally understand from a purely human perspective of a young girl. In fact, even a young boy, I this is not gender specific, but feeling lost and alone and gravitating towards someone and wanting to be them because they, you know, they see that other person having what they want. And so, Olive had her,
she had a boyfriend, she had the family. Well, and a family that, so, you know, Angelina's family rejected her, and now, but Olive has a family not only embraces and is a really close nuclear family that supports each other, but they believe what's going on. They have not rejected because of the callings.
Angelina's parents made Angelina feel crazy, and Grace and Ben do not make Angelina feel crazy because they can understand her. And you mentioned this, and I don't know if we want to spend a whole lot of time talking about it, but I also do really appreciate that Ben and Grace have been such a strong family and shown that on TV. I mean, yes, they had issues. Yes, there was sort of a separation, but there was never, Ben isn't portrayed as the man who's just stupid and like, you know, a dutz because he's a guy. Right. You know, they both have issues and they both have come together and they both are trying to do what's best for their family and be that loving, nurturing family unit. Right. Yeah. And he's also not so obsessed that he neglects his family and that sort of thing. Right. That would be another way that could undermine it. So there's a couple other points I want to bring up in from the beginning, there's a whole government conspiracy thing. Like, so how does the government react to this? And naturally, some people in the government want to exploit it for whatever purposes, for national security purposes, or whatever. We have this character she's called the Major. She's a major general. She's not like a major, she's a major general, who is manipulating behind the scenes. And it seems what she's trying to do is to take these abilities that they see the passengers exhibiting, these visions, the callings, and wants to exploit them. And it made me think, like, so that they could weaponize and have
on command, being able to see visions of things far away or in the future, which made me think of Project Stargate and remote viewing, not Stargate, the TV show, but there was an actual project by the U.S. military back in the 80s and 90s, early 90s, called Project Stargate, where they recruited people who had paranormal abilities, apparent paranormal abilities, to remote view, to see things at a distance, sort of like 11 in Stranger Things, to see things far away or even bit in the future. And whatever you believe, they report having been able to do certain things and see certain things that aren't explainable by normal means, if everyone's telling the truth here. Jimmy Akin has talked about this. He and I have talked about this a lot on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. So there are a number of episodes to go to look at. If you want to learn more about this, just, go to sqpn.com/mysterious, look for episodes about remote viewing. There's plenty there. So I just thought it was interesting to see, like, I wonder if they pulled from that. I don't think they ever mentioned Project Stargate by name, but it seemed like she was trying to recreate this remote viewing thing. So it's plausible to me that this would happen. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. And of course, that's why she was after the Holy Grail, which was Cal, because Cal is able to see things before they happen, not just sort of have a kind of a current shared reality experience like some of them have, but he would see things, because even Cal wonders, do I cause this to happen if I draw it out in my notebook?
Right.
And Zeke has to kind of point out, like, no, draw a pot of gold and you're not going to get a pot of gold. He's just seeing things before they happen. And that's exactly why the Major is searching for him, which, I mean, makes sense from a national security standpoint. But of course, like anything like this, we all cringe at the immorality of the way that the government is going about testing and harming people and not caring who gets in their way. And
several different points in here. The different people who represent the government are doing bad. Now, Robert Vance is sort of on the passenger side. He's the NSA guy, but there's a lot of other people, including that one Dr. Gupta. Just funny. My physician, his name's Dr. Gupta. I just think it's funny. But there's a really nice scene in the season finale of the third season where the coin drops. She finally gets it. Something convinces her that she needs to listen to Cal. So that's a really good moment in that.
Yep.
So Noah's. Okay.
No, I was just gonna say I love the twists. Like, you think Robert Vance is this just stuck up government guy, and then oh, actually no, he's on the good side, and then of course he dies, so to speak, and then comes back. Thankfully, but not supernaturally. Right. Yeah, he was just saved. And Dr. Gupta, I loved her character, and then to see someone with such a harsh science only kind of mind,
anti-faith even. Yeah, and it was like pointed out to her that where she would look in the sky in a certain constellation, where she just always assumed her grandmother was in heaven when she was a little girl, when her grandmother died.
That was like the diagram that Cal drew and was pointing out where they needed to return the tail fin at the end of season 3. And that was like, it just, I love it because there are just things like that happen in our world too, where it's like, this is way too coincidental to be anything but divine providence.
Right.
And that the coin drops for us too. And it's like, and that's faith. That's where faith is found.
That's right. So Noah's Ark shows up in a way in this. They get a piece of Noah's Ark, the NSA does, for their testing. They're trying to test the recovered parts of the plane that they've got. The plane landed, but then blew up on the tarmac unexpectedly for some reason. And then for some other reason we still don't have an explanation for, the tail fin was found in the ocean where the plane.
Well, we sort of have an explanation. It's sort of implied that because Sanvi experimented on herself and removed her genetic marker that allowed her to
receive the callings.
Yeah. It was implied that caused the tail fin to resurface, and like that had to be corrected. So like, I think like they had to bring the tail fin and put it back in the ocean. Right. And like that caused Sanvi to then regain the ability to receive callings.
But of course, why is the tail fin in the ocean in the first place? Since the plane. That's what I was getting at. Was like for some reason the tail fins in the ocean, even though the plane landed in New York and blew up on the tarmac, but not next to not near Cuba where the tail fin was found.
Right.
After having been in the water for 5 years, like it was, yeah. So we've still got a mystery there. We got to figure that one out.
Yep.
But we have Noah's Ark, a piece of Noah's Ark that they're testing because they're saying that there's some similarities, some events around Noah's Ark and the flood are somehow related to or connected to. And then they had this funny whole thing about the Vatican being involved in it, which was you and I were both cracking up about that when that happened.
Yeah, you see the triple tiara, and it's like, oh, this is a Vatican box, and there's something cool there. And
yeah. Their explanation for I love how people who are not in the church, how like especially in TV and movies, they have this idea of how the church must work, this super like very organized, and like anybody who's ever worked in the church knows we're far from super organized. We're a mess. We are a divine institution because we must be to have survived 2,000 years in this kind of mess.
The Holy See is in Italy, and it's Italians, and they like their siestas, and
it is. Yeah, I mean things get done, but it is nowhere near the highly organized organization they think. But it's interesting to tell the story of Noah at one point at the end of season 3. And like, oh, so Noah cursed the people and that's what caused the flood. Like, so it's Noah's fault that all this bad stuff happened after the flood. And I'm like, does God have no agency in this? Like God, like, no, it's not Noah's fault. It is. I mean, even if Noah did curse and call down God to flood the world, unless God wills it, it ain't happening.
I think they pointed out that like, I think that was Olive. Like she found a different version of the story, because obviously if you read in our Christian Bible, that's not how the story goes.
Right.
But you also have like all sorts of different flood accounts and all the literature of the ancient world too. Yes. So they're sort of still drawing on that too. But yeah, there was that one that sort of, it mentioned Noah kind of specifically as the cause, but I think that's just made up for the show.
So there was something having to do with like in the season 3 about sapphire, and you mentioned like because they keep seeing sapphire glowing. Some of them have sapphire glowing in their hands, and
yep. So that was one of the things on the Ark piece, or the Noah's Ark piece, is that they mentioned that there was sapphire dust, or there was something with sapphire on it, and they all got excited because Dr. Gupta, and I think she's the one that points it out, or Sanvi points it out, that sapphire is always connected to divinity, to the divine. And I don't remember if they find sapphire in Ben's hand when it's glowing and stuff. They might have. I don't remember, but the fact that there's more of these divine connections, and so I did some quick biblical scouting, and sapphire in the Bible is there's 4 major points where sapphire is mentioned specifically, and they all have to relate somehow with God and the divine. So the first one would be when Moses encounters God on Mount Sinai. It mentions sapphire underneath God as he gives him and the elders the 10 commandments. And so this is Exodus 24 chapters 9 through 11. And then also the priestly garments that the priests would wear in service of the temple. And in fact, at that point, it was in the meeting tent and the Ark of the Covenant. The priests, their garments were made out of, part of their garments, their breastplate was made out of sapphire. And this is Exodus 39. And then Ezekiel, the prophet, in his calling, he sees God seated on a throne of sapphire. So this is the first chapters of Ezekiel. And then finally, John sees sapphire in making up the stones of the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation. So this is Revelation chapter 21. So,
yeah, you see sapphire in scripture is associated with power, like God's power, divine power, that divine authority, even, because his throne and that sort of stuff. So very interesting to see it there throughout there. And my guess is the writers, it's good to see that they went to the Bible and found this stuff. I mean, they must be familiar with some
and
of this stuff.
And it's rare and it's beautiful. I mean, it's not just gold or silver. They specifically went down the sapphire route. So
yeah, interesting.
That was intentional.
And I'm curious where they're going to go with that, because that will be an interesting. Speaking of where they're going to go, we should probably get to the end of this season and talk about what we might expect coming up. So at the end of season 3, we have they determine that Cal, who is suffering like these awful burns on his body, is telling him that the tailfin needs to go back in the ocean. No one at the NSA project examining it will believe him and Ben and Grace and Zanvi. Well, Vance does, but Dr. Gupta won't believe it. And so finally, in the midst of all this, he just says, "You know what? I have to convince him the hard way." He goes and he puts his hand, he touches the fin, and disappears. And so we don't know what that means. And so they decide, okay, the only way to get him back is to drop the tail fin in the ocean, which the Sanvi and Ben do. Sanvi falls overboard. Ben goes to rescue her in the act of dropping it. And Sanvi seems to have been redeemed at this point, right? She gets her calling ability to do the calling back. Meanwhile, there's a group of 828 passengers. There's now a split among them, and there's a group of them being led by Adrian and this guy Egan, who are rejecting Ben Stone's leadership, and they think that there's an internal division between them. And Angelina is with them. She goes back to the house, the Stone house, and steals the baby, and apparently kills Grace. Like, she stabs Grace. I think she's dead, because by the end of the episode, she's staring blankly like a dead person into space.
I'm pretty sure she is officially dead.
Okay. And then Cal, a teenage boy who's years older now, shows up and says, it says goodbye to his mom. But
he's 5 years older.
Cal. And the other thing that happens at the end of this episode is, as the tail fin disappears under the ocean, under the water, back in the lab where Dr. Gupta is, she's like the last one there. She turns around and sees the pilot of the plane appear in the cockpit of this decrepit, burned out shell of the plane for a second. And then he and the plane disappear. Okay, and that's where the season hangs on the cliff. So what do you think?
He looked like he was on a roller coaster. Yeah. Like, he appears and he has this complete shock look on his face, and then says, "Oh no," or something, as if he's going down another hill, and then just disappears.
Right. Again. He's going to go back to wherever he came from. So what do you think? What do we expect? I mean, do you think Cal is now the same age as Olive?
Yes.
Regained the 5 years?
Yes. I have no idea how to explain that.
Hopefully the showrunners do.
Right. Because in essence, it's the same thing. Yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around it, because you have things like the tail fin that aged 5 years and reappeared, and that the whole point was to put it back.
Right.
And so Cal now disappears and reappears 5 years later, but he didn't appear because something went wrong. He disappeared. I don't know. He touched the tail fin, and I don't know. That's one of the things that I love about it, is that I love a good mystery, and I love, good storytelling that's going to give us not just an answer, but one that's a satisfying answer. And so I kind of have high hopes for where we're going, because
do you think the show is going to be different because it's Netflix now and not network TV?
In general, I think it's going to feel the same. It's going to look the same. I mean, thankfully, all the same actors were able to come back. I know there was a potential Zeke wasn't coming back, but he was able to come back and full time and everything. So to be honest, and I hope it doesn't really go down this road, but there's the potential for more profanity than network TV.
Profanity and then other stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
More violence and maybe more sexual content, possibly.
Yeah. And I'm not sure they'd go down that road because it's just not that kind of a show. But
it's not. Yeah.
I would expect a little bit more profanity and a little bit more violence. Hopefully not too bad, because I don't think you need that stuff to make a good show.
Yeah.
You can show enough to make the point, and that's
Do you think it'll get darker like a Stranger Things? Like Stranger Things has gotten darker as it went on. Do you think it'll get darker?
Well, if this is sort of the penultimate season, it would make perfect sense for this to be The Empire Strikes Back before The Return of the Jedi, where this sort of goes. It would make sense that this season will. Well, I think a number of things, of course, with Grace being killed, we're going to have a darker Ben. And I've seen lots of, I mean, he grows out a beard, and so they call it his grief beard. And I mean, so they kind of make light of it on social media, but Ben is going to be in a really dark place. And I think we're going to see the aftermath of that. I know from what I've heard, there is a time jump from the end of season 3 to where we pick up, and whether I think it's like a year to a year and a half time jump.
Okay.
So I know we're still going to see the kind of the outfall of Grace's death, and then of course Cal's reappearance mystery and all of these things. So I think it definitely will be darker, and then I think it'll take off again into the finale.
Take off. That also would probably means that the baby that's been kidnapped will not be recovered in that year and a half time frame.
And that's an interesting thing too. Yeah, I don't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting.
Angelina's just kind of she's on my bad list.
Yes. Yeah, just even for the cringy way she tried to evangelize and share her faith.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, hey, share your faith. That's great, but it was like it's very stereotypical of cringy Christian, that the way they depicted it.
Right. But then also just she's an example, and of course she would have gotten it from her parents too, is the extreme fanatical Christianity that isn't good.
Yeah.
Because she is choosing. Yeah, she is using her assumptions on, the Eden being a guardian angel to justify kidnapping,
right?
To justify moral evil, or even, to be in with the guys who were planning, violence. These moral evils.
Yeah. That's right. It's interesting to think of where we're going with this, but I have no doubt that the moral and religious themes are going to continue. That seems to be a part and parcel of this show. So I'll be curious to see where we're going. So we have the titles of the next 10 episodes, and they're dropping, like we said, November 4th. I do like the puns that they use aviation terms for almost all the titles. In fact, I think all the titles, they're all aviation related.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So in any case, I think that about does it now.
So there one more question.
What is it?
Are you Team Jared or Team Zeke?
Oh, Zeke. Team Zeke. Sorry. Yeah. I are you Team Jared or Team Zeke? I mean, I feel bad for Jared, but
right. I mean, I have to fall into the realm of Zeke and Michaela entered into a valid marriage, therefore.
Yes, exactly.
We're gonna see drama there. They're clearly playing that up a little bit on the fact that, I think Michaela. Well, if Michaela only entered into marriage with Zeke because she thought he was gonna die,
Yeah, would be a grounds for annulment, I would think.
You could argue that could be, well, but maybe not, because she was planning on being with him till death did them part. But
yeah,
death just didn't happen as quick as she was thinking.
Right.
So, right. So yeah, I mean, definitely, I'm on the road of I feel so bad for Jared, and of course in season 1 you were sort of rooting for Jared and Michaela, and then Zeke comes along.
Right.
So I know that they're gonna go there. Well, so we're gonna see more of that.
And now Jared's with the Major's daughter, so there's that.
Yeah, but not really. I mean, he clearly is holding out that Michaela's gonna become available again.
Yeah.
Because he even says at one point, I think, because Michaela was involved in the cover up of the Major's death, that he can't tell that to her without like causing all sorts of awkwardness and needing to break up. Right.
That's true. Well, yeah. So anyway, Team Zeke all the way. All right. So let's wrap it up there. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the secrets of movies and TV shows, including Whitney C., Faker Mage, Michael L., Caitlin F., and Matthew D. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the secrets of movies and TV shows and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. We would love to hear what you think of Manifest, especially what you think is going to happen next. That would be very interesting to hear from. Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/secrets, or the StarQuest Facebook page, or send an email to secrets@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Until next time, Father Andrew, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Manifest.
Absolutely. Can't wait till next week.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the secrets of movies and TV shows on StarQuest.